Boys and girls of every age, wouldn't you like to hear something strange? Come with me and you shall see how the Nightmare Before Christmas came to be.
What's this? I can't believe my eyes. I must be dreaming. Wake up, Jack. This isn't fair.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Unscripted, where this week we're talking about The Nightmare Before Christmas. So sit back, relax, and hold on while we step through the door to Halloween Town to see just how spooky Christmas can really be. The Nightmare Before Christmas came out in the year 1993. The director was Henry Selick, with producers Tim Burton, Denise Denovi, and Don Hahn, who directed the 3D version in 2006. The co-producer was Kathleen Gavin, with associate producers Danny Elfman, Jill Jacobs, Diane Minter-Lewis, and Philip LaFaro. The film had a budget of $18 million at the start. And The Nightmare Before Christmas is based off a book written by Tim Burton himself, so to understand how the movie was made, we first need to understand a little bit about the book that he wrote. Tim Burton's book, The Nightmare Before Christmas, is a twist on the tale The Night Before Christmas. This was the first book he wrote and illustrated, and it was released the same year as the film, 1993. Just like any other book-to-film adaptation, the book and the film have their similarities and their differences. The movie follows the same storyline, with a few things added into the story to make it a little bit longer. The book focuses on Jack's story. There really aren't very many, if any, subplots, where the film follows Jack's story, Sally's story, and more. And if you've read the book before, you've probably noticed that Oogie Boogie actually isn't in the book at all. The mayor and Sally are only background characters in the book, and in the movie, they're turned into main and side characters. And if you've read the book, you probably also noticed that the book doesn't have a grand Halloween time entrance like the movie does. There are only 3 doors in the books, where in the films you can see there are more doors added into the forest. Other than that, they're pretty much the same, right down to the jack-o'-lantern face on the sun in the forest. It's a very accurate adaptation. So now that we know a little bit about the book, let's get into how the movie was made. Starting with the screenplay, it was written by Caroline Thompson, and Michael McDowell did the adaptation. Both of them have writing credits. Tim Burton is credited with the story and the characters, not the screenplay. The first draft was completed and/or submitted on August 5th, 1991. And just like every first to final draft, there are always changes made. And one of the biggest changes that you'll notice, if you take a look at the first draft compared to the final draft, is the opening of the film. The first draft's opening goes a little bit like this. "'Twas a long time ago, quite a bit to be fair, in a place that I'm sure you are quite unaware, for our story that you are about to be told began in the holiday worlds of old. Without holidays, goodness, how dull life would be, without their distraction and pleasure and glee." And that's just a little snippet from the first draft, and here's what the final draft sounds like. "'Twas a long time ago, longer now than it seems, in a place that perhaps you've seen in your dreams, for the story that you are about to be told took place in the holiday worlds of old. Now you've probably wondered where holidays come from. If you haven't, I'd say it's time you begun." As you can see, the script went through a lot of changes before the final product came out. And one of the other changes that I noticed when I was going through both of the scripts was the opening song went from a pumpkin head singing the first part to various shadows and ghosts singing the first part instead, which I just found kind of interesting. Now, another thing that happens before we start casting and recording anything is going to be your dialogue, your score, your soundtrack, because in animation all of those things come before any kind of recording is done. So our score was done by Danny Elfman. And when Elfman signed on, there was a storyline from years before, but not much of a script had been done yet. The script and songs actually grew from images that Tim drew, as well as the story. Elfman would talk to Burton, and then he would write songs based on what they talked about. based on scene descriptions that he got from Burton. And as soon as Burton finished the description and left, Elfman would begin work on a song, and a few days later, Burton would listen to the song, and the process would then repeat until all the songs were complete. Burton had drawings or would draw things for Elfman to give him as visuals for scenes and characters involved in scenes to help him with the songwriting process. The songs were finalized early on, and because of that, they were the first thing to go into production. And now that we have our songs, our score, and a script, the next thing we need is a cast to make this script come to life. Starting with Chris Sarandon, who is the speaking voice of Jack Skellington. He was cast because his speaking voice matched that of Danny Elfman's singing voice. Danny Elfman is the singing voice of Jack Skellington, and he also voices Beryl and the clown with the tearaway face. Tim described Jack to Elfman, and Elfman immediately felt a connection to Jack, and insisted that he be the one to sing the songs for Jack. Catherine O'Hara was the voice of Sally and Shock. Ken Page was the voice of Oogie Boogie. And here's how Page was cast. Elfman called Page's lawyer, who Page said is also, or was at the time, also Elfman's lawyer, looking for someone with a vocal reminiscence of Cap Calloway, Fats Waller, those kinds of singers. The lawyer recommended Page, so Page flew out to meet the crew. The song is what hooked him and made him want to take the role. William Hickey was the voice of Dr. Finkelstein, Glenn Shaddix the voice of the mayor, Paul Rubens the voice of Locke, Edward Ivory was the voice of Santa, Susan McBride voiced the Big Witch, Debbie Durst, the Corpse Kid, Corpse Mom, and Small Witch, Gray Proops voiced Harlequin Demon, Devil, and sax player, Carrie Katz voiced the Man Under the Stairs, one of the vampires and Corpse Dad. Randy Crenshaw voiced Mr. Hyde, one of the vampires, and Behemoth. Sherwood Ball voiced the Mummy and one of the vampires. Carmen Twilly voiced the Undersea Gal and the Man Under the Stairs. Glenn Walters voiced the Wolfman. And when Catherine O'Hara started voicing Sally, she first tried using a broken voice, because Sally is a broken character. But she soon stopped using it because it actually kind of got in the way. Next up, we have our storyboard. Now that we have all of our casting done, we have our storyboard. The storyboard supervisor was Joseph Rampt. He works with the director to put together the first visuals of the film. And the storyboards were very specific. There were several drawings for scenes, and it worked in continuity with the voice, the music, and the sound. It's pretty much a pre-made movie before animation begins. And you can't really have a stop-motion animated movie without an art department, right? The art director was Deanne Taylor, and they created environments and characters based on storyboards and requests from Selick and Burton's drawings. Burton's color palette for Halloween Town was black, white, and orange. And for Halloween Town, they followed a kind of German expressionism. For Christmas Town, it was more Dr. Seuss-esque. And the real world was plain and simple. And Selick said the designs should be like a pop-up book, and should feel like something that you could fall into. And in my opinion, they did an absolutely brilliant job making it feel like something you could just fall right into. The art directors wanted to give the sets and characters a look reminiscent of the pen and ink illustrations of artists like Rob Searle and Edward Gorey. And to achieve this, they used elaborate cross-hatching and textures. They'd spread clay or plaster on the sets, then draw lines all over them to give them a sort of etched feeling, to kind of look like a live illustration. Art directors make necessary tools for set people to make and maintain that look, the etched look. So they had very specific tools that they would use to make sure that these sets stayed in good condition throughout filming. They would then make scale drawings that would go straight to set designer Gray Olson, who would make a scale model based on the drawings and then starts to work out camera angles and how much set they would need. Olson would make quarter-scale mock-ups, pretty much a model of the actual set, and the full scale of the set would be 4 times larger than the model, and it ended up being about 24 feet long in the end. And the set was so big that it actually couldn't fit on one stage, so there were a lot of built-in spots where the set could be broken apart and put back together. And the animators, they didn't want to have to reach more than 2 feet to move characters around, so most of the set was within that range. But what would they do if it was more than 2 feet away? Well, there was a simple fix for it. The set designers actually built trapdoors into the sets so that animators could pop in and out of the set to animate the characters however they needed to get the scene. And once the models are built, the director then uses a director's viewfinder to practice what he wants to see on film. And if he likes it, then the set is built in full scale and sent to the paint and modeling shops for detailing, then put on stage. And once again, this film is a stop-motion animated film, and stop-motion is usually made with clay. And you can't exactly build things out of clay without sculptors. So when it came to sculpting the characters, they actually had 3 to 4 people sculpting all the characters. And they would get a character drawing from the art department, and then they would sculpt the character using an oil-based clay. An oil-based clay is very easy to work with, it's very versatile, and it can be smoothed out with alcohol. The clay had to be a soft medium so that they could use a hard mold plaster that won't rip up the mold, and so they can put the soft mold rubber into the mold. And every puppet also has an armature in it. It's kind of like a ball and socket. It allows you to move the puppet around in more natural, human-like ways. And to make the armatures, armature engineers would get sculptures and drawings, front view and side view of the characters, and from there they would determine where the joints needed to go. There were 2 different kinds of joints that they would use for these armatures as well. The first one was a ball joint, and they would use it in places like in the neck. And the second was a hinge, and they used those in places like the hips. All of the parts for the armatures were made to fit perfect for each character in order to ensure smooth movement throughout the film. After a character is sculpted, it then goes into the mold department. There, they lay the armature into the mold. After that, it's injected with a foam latex material that covers the armature, then it's baked in an oven, taken out of the mold, and taken to fabrication. And the fabrication department is where paint jobs, hair, fur, everything that completes the puppet's character is taken care of in the fabrication department. When the character is done in fabrication, it's taken into animation. Now, this film has 60 individual characters, and many of these characters have 2 to 3 duplicates, taking the total to over 200 puppets, the total being 227 puppets used in this film. There were very few CGI effects used. A majority of this film was done practically. And now we'll get right into the filming of this movie. And production lasted a total of 3 years, and during those 3 years, Ken Page went in to record 3 or 4 times. Sarandon worked on the film for 2 of the 3 years, and he had to fly in to record 1 or 2 scenes, and then those scenes would then be animated over about 3 months. And according to Sarandon, 11 seconds of usable film was shot every week. He was never in the studio with anyone but Selick, and he had 1 day with Catherine O'Hara. After recording, the director then goes through the recordings and takes out what he wants, and that goes on to animation. The film took over 100 artists and technicians to bring it to life. It was shot in 24 frames per second, which gives you a total of 109,440 frames in the film. There were as many as 20 stages and 15 animators working at once. Over the 3 years of production, they filled at least 19 sound stages with 230 sets and hundreds of puppets. And to just give you an idea of why this film was in production for so long, and just how difficult it is to make a stop-motion animated film, about 1 minute of completed animated film would take them an entire week of shooting. And when they're going through and putting it all together, they can't actually see if anything has gone wrong until they watch it all put together. So if one thing goes wrong, they then have to redo the entire shoot. And this film is 76 minutes long. The animators, during the process of filming, would act out actions, and then they would duplicate the move that they did with the puppets to make it more realistic. The animation supervisor, who was also an animator in this film, was Eric Layton. But going back into how the animators would act things out, the action would be tested 3 to 4 times before it was shot. And to animate Jack's facial expressions and mouth movements, animators used hundreds of different hand-sculpted heads. For mouth positions, they used the vowels and recreated those with a bunch of different expressions. And in total, they had around 400 Jack heads. To help animators know which heads to use, all of the heads were photographed with front and side views, and the picture was printed and labeled and then put onto the lid of the case that they had all of the heads stored in. And this would help them to be able to pick a head that matched each syllable of his dialogue or song. Now you're probably wondering, how exactly do they make characters blink here? And if you're not, that's okay, because I was curious, so I have the information anyways. So to make characters blink, we'll start with Jack. With Jack, they actually had replacement pieces that would fit into his eye sockets, and that would simulate each individual movement of the blink. For other characters, I would just guess that they had different eyelid pieces that they would put onto the characters' faces. Now, we've talked a lot about Jack, but there's another character that is quite interesting when it comes to the sculpture of her character, and that is going to be Sally. And Sally can speak and show emotions similar to Jack, except instead of having whole different heads for her, she actually had a ton of different masks made for her face. They would use masks for her instead of full heads because of her hair, and the way that they needed to move her hair for the animation. So her hair was separate from her face. And Oogie Boogie was the last character to be voiced and animated. And Peter Kozaczyk was the director of photography, and the reason I bring that up now is we're going to start getting into how exactly the shots were done for this film. The sets were lit as if they were full-size movie sets, even though they were miniatures, and the way they did this was they just used smaller lighting instruments. The goal was to make it look real and not like they were performing tricks. There were 8 different camera crews, and the consistency was very difficult for this film. There was lots of motion control camera moves, lots of communication between directors and motion control camera operations to get the best shots for each action. The motion control camera operation was a little bit of a complicated task. And here's how the motion control camera operations would work. So this MCC operation, if you will, it can track and take the camera in and out. It can swing it side to side, and a boom arm can move it vertically. On the head, they have a pan and a tilt, and it has its own roll of film, and sometimes a focus if they needed it. And to get moving shots, the MCC operations would give the computer start and end points, and the computer would then compose the move. The motion computer control operations and animators work together for about 3 days to get the shots ready to go before animators take over the shot. And then finally, we get into the post-production and the box office. And as I said before, there aren't actually very many CGI effects in this film. There are a few, though, so we'll go over a couple of them. The first one I want to talk about is in the beginning of the film, when the ghosts are carrying the packages. And this was done by drawing the ghosts using blue screen and rotoscoping. Rotoscoping is a process in which the footage is taken and traced frame by frame to add computer animation to it. They traced the packages frame by frame, and then they drew the ghosts in digitally later. The shadows were also done digitally, and an example of this is Oogie Boogie on the Moon. And then I also have a cute little story about Chris Sarandon when he got a copy of the working cut of the film. They sent him a VHS copy of the working cut, and this version of it was in black and white, and it still had a timestamp on it. And he and Burton would later go into the studio to do some work on it together. What he did was when he got this, he put the VHS into his VHS machine, and slowly all three of his kids came in to watch it with him, and they were completely mesmerized by this film. And it was at that moment that Chris Sarandon knew that he had a really good movie on his hands. And now on to the box office. Now, opening weekend in the United States and Canada, the film earned $191,232. And it actually had multiple release dates. So the New York Film Festival, it was released on October 9th, 1993. And then it came out on a limited release in the US on October 13th, 1993. And then it was released in the US again on October 29th, 1993, among many, many more release dates for the US and countries all over the world. The gross in the United States and Canada added up to $77,368,668, and the worldwide gross in box office was $91,221,845. And to close out today's episode, I just want to go over a little bit of social impact and some things that came from the film itself. So Ken Page found out about the film's cult classic popularity while he was at a show in LA from a goth stage crew member who asked if he was Oogie Boogie and then proceeded to fill him in on a club he and his friends were going to that played the Oogie Boogie song before closing every night. Sarandon said he witnessed it slowly grow and gain popularity through the conventions he went to for other films he'd done. He said it started with young people into goth who felt the movie spoke to them. Then more families started getting into it, and it slowly spread and went viral from there. This film is just another one of those films that is fit for all generations. And the cast has gone back and revisited the characters many times to provide the voice for other projects, including the Kingdom Hearts series and the Disney Haunted Mansion Holiday. And I'm really quickly just going to go over a couple of things that came from this film as well. There's a very long, long list of things that have come into the parks or been created because of this film, but I'm not going to go over all of them. Just a few kind of big things. Like in 2001, Disneyland did its first holiday overlay on the Haunted Mansion. They changed it for the Halloween and Christmas seasons to be themed to the Nightmare Before Christmas. And it was very popular, so now the attraction changes every year, and you can hear the voices of the original actors on this attraction too. Jack is also the host of Disney's Halloween Screams and Disney's Not So Spooky Spectacular in both Disneyland and Disney World. He also shows up in the Frightfully Fun Parade, and in 2004 we saw a video game come out that's kind of a continuation of the Halloween story. The video game is known as Oogie's Revenge, and it takes place 1 year after Oogie was defeated in the film. But now he's returned and he's taken over Halloween Town. The players play as Jack, and they have to save Halloween Town by stopping Oogie once again. 2 years before that, so in 2002, we have Kingdom Hearts, and we see Jack make yet another appearance on screen, this time in video game format. In 2008, Jack appeared for the first time as a costume character in Disneyland Paris, and in 2012, we saw Jack and Sally appear in the parks, in the Disney parks in America. In 2014, Sandy Claus Jack was introduced into the park. And in 2015, Jack appeared in a Disney on Ice show. In 2019, we saw the first fully articulate Jack Skellington puppet appear in the not-so-scary Halloween fireworks show in Walt Disney World, as well as in the Halloween Screams fireworks show in Disneyland. The Nightmare Before Christmas is one of the most popular Halloween or Christmas movies, whenever you prefer to watch it, I think, of all time. And most importantly, The Nightmare Before Christmas revived stop-motion animation films and shorts. So it came out as stop-motion was kind of fading away, and it brought the attention back into stop-motion creations. There are whole conventions now dedicated to The Nightmare Before Christmas, and there are people who have kept the VHS tapes of The Nightmare Before Christmas and have taken them to get signed by the cast. There are tons of costumes and merchandise based on the films, and people even get the characters tattooed on themselves. The Nightmare Before Christmas has had a lasting impact on society and the film industry, and it has made a huge difference in how stop-motion animation is approached, and it brought it back to life. And that is how The Nightmare Before Christmas came to be. Thank you all so much for listening. I will see you all in the next episode.